Welcome to LoTech Tuesdays by LoTech and Wild, the podcast for people who live their lives unplugged and for those who want to.
Welcome to this is my office where everything is it's the same. It's like cameras and you can't see everything, but there's like...
Yours is way better than mine, though. Yeah.
Just constant chaos, which is okay, right?
Yeah. Depending, your chaos looks a lot more colorful and pretty than mine. Mine is, it's pretty scary back there. I'm not gonna lie.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, Nathan, let's talk a little bit about what you do.
Okay. Right now, I guess I am considered a outdoor adventure short film maker and photographer, I think is the best way to say it. I dabble between the two different mediums of doing photography for companies, making short films for companies, whether it's climbing or cars and Toyotas and that sort of thing. I kind of hop between all those different avenues right now.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, you got to pay the bills, right? So, is your main thing cars?
It's really not. For the first 2 years of working in film and photography, it was automotive. I worked on a lot of adventure travel shows by vehicle that took me all over the world, and that's how I kind of got used to shooting adventure and getting uncomfortable and being in weird situations and still having to make a product out of the trip. But since then, obviously with climate change and everything, I don't really want to be shooting uneco-friendly things and putting that kind of stuff out in the world. I understand that's where we are right now, but I'm trying to transition myself into being more eco-friendly. So that's when I decided to really transition into adventure stuff, whether it's climbing, biking, hiking, or skiing, but kind of promoting those activities, hopefully with an environmental message laced in there somehow, just to keep us, moving forward and being aware of what we're doing.
For sure. Yeah. That drums up so many questions.
Yeah.
So, we're in the, just the throes of the electric car movement again. And I don't know if you remember, but many years ago, there was this film called Who Stole the Electric Car? Do you remember that?
I do. I remember nerding out on that, whatever year that was. I was like, oh my God, where's the electric car? Come on.
Seems like we have got, all of those companies that were part of the conspiracy or whatever are diving full force into investing in electric cars. But then there's the battery issue, we're still not out of the woods. We're just possibly getting rid of the emissions issue that automobiles have put us in.
I've been doing, recently, it was about a month ago, I went to the Toyota Tundra hybrid launch, and even in that launch, they still didn't have their EPA numbers yet for fuel economy. And I'm guilty. I drive a Tundra right now. My lifestyle, what I do, the Tundra is a great vehicle, but it gets awful fuel economy. It's terrible. So the idea of getting a Tundra that gets at least 20 miles per gallon seems like a great thing. But the more I read into, you're saying, batteries and all that kind of stuff, I actually can't find good information on where all the lithium is coming from and what the offset of what we're doing actually is. So, and if anybody knows, call me because I want to know. I've been trying to find it on my own, but so far all I can find is, the typical drilling and gas pollutions and emissions and that sort of thing. So
yeah.
I'm curious too. I want to know what's going on.
I feel like Tesla is probably going to be the leader in that. At the OR Expo, there was an all electric truck that they were putting out. That was kind of exciting. But, and I'm sure that as these new companies are starting to form, that's something that's really on their mind, different ways to get the energy generated. And I just bought my first car in 7 years.
Congratulations. What did you end up getting?
I got a 2008 Mini Cooper.
Whoa, that's awesome. Do you just feel like you're in that Italian job all the time, like zipping through?
A
Is
little
it?
bit. It's hard not to just like go speeding around on all of the roads and just like, and want to go in like, pavilion passageways and, I mean.
Hit flowers and bushes go flying all over you. And I'm jealous. I'm super jealous. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, we got the Clubman too. So it's got a long back and the seats go down and I can put my bike back there and, yeah.
And still look cool. My vehicle does not look cool. It's like dented and everything, like my bumpers are like falling off, and it's got like nice tires so I can go everywhere, anything I want to do, but like aesthetically, I've got like an old man topper, which is like those old aluminum ones. You could literally, I shouldn't probably say this, but you could push through the back panel because it's that cheap plastic and just grab all my climbing gear out of the back and just be like gone.
I won't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. I would cry for
Never
days.
mind that this is a podcast.
They don't know what color it is. I should be okay.
We won't disclose where you're located. How about
There
that?
you go. There you go. Top secret.
No, that's fantastic. I love those. I feel like there's also like a little bit less risk too. Like, when you are driving around with a shiny brand new automobile or something like that, it's always kind of like, oh, or like one of my many bicycles, whenever it was like brand new and like a little bit of dirt would get on it, I'm instantly like trying to like wipe it off or something, so it's nice and pristine and shiny. After you get that first scratch or dent or fall, then it's just like, all right, throw some stickers on there, let it happen.
Yeah, I agree. I tried the same thing even when I got this. It was definitely used, but not as used as it is now. But once I got that first bumper bump, I like ran into the garage door one day and there's this white smear on it now. And once I did that, I was like, that's not coming off. It's over. I'm just gonna rally this thing and see how long it lasts.
Okay, so I'm curious, this vehicle that you're driving is probably not how you got connected with Toyota. So did you pitch them, initially did they find you somehow? What was the path with finding commercial work?
Yeah. Yeah, that started right out of film school. It was actually a a travel, how do I say it, a vehicle travel show that was working with Toyota and General Tire and kind of those big brand names. And I just got hired on as a like an intern essentially. And that's how it all started. So I started as an intern. I worked my way into being an editor. Then I really wanted to be a shooter. So I worked my way into being like an assistant shooter to being the shooter to, it wasn't called the DP of the show, but essentially directing the shooting aspect of the show, from drones to cameras to lenses to batteries, like the whole gamut, to offloading every night. So it was a great learning experience on how to get there. But since then, I haven't shot like a Toyota commercial. I can't say I've done that. What I've done though is shot things for like Outside Magazine where they need an article on the new Tundra launch, for instance, and then I go with a journalist. The journalist does the talking, and I film the journalist doing the talking about the new Tundra. So, yeah, I can't say that I'm like a super commercial shooter, although I wouldn't mind being, because it's like kind of, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's like nice work to have. But most of the stuff I do is still pretty documentary, but documentary with these bigger companies and bigger brands and that sort of thing.
Right. No, I just meant commercial is in paid work.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry.
Not like TV commercials and things.
Oh, my bad.
That is commercial work. Commercial work is commercial work also.
Yeah. No, for my mind always just jumps to like car ads running through the desert, like type stuff. So
those are very exciting.
yeah, I mean, I'd take those any day. That'd be super fun to shoot too. So
Yeah. Well, like you said, though, this is a very like who industry.
yeah, definitely.
So, I imagine that once you get connected, do you ever send out pitches or do you ever chase a job? Some of them are very hidden also.
Yeah, because I'm always learning, to be honest. I'm in that right now, with 3 different projects, actually 4 as of this week, and with 3 of them we're going the grant route. We're writing grants for. One of them we're thinking about pitching to companies, but I think my best example is last year we were working on the film called The Nutcracker, and it's right before COVID happened, and we actually had a really nice budget for the size of the crew and everything, and it was looking great. But then once COVID happened, everybody dropped because nobody knew it was going to happen, and I totally get that. But that was my first like real experience of like pitching to. I think we went to like 6 to 8 different companies, and we probably got like 3 or 4 to hop on
As sponsors.
as sponsors. Yep, yeah. Yep. So they get their name on the film. They get to use like photography and media assets and trailers for promotion on Instagram, Facebook, whatever they want to do, their websites. Was kind of like that trade off. So, did I answer the question? Did I just go way off on a tangent?
No, but that seems so that more than that being a job that somebody's hiring you to do. I mean, unless Matt Cornell and Conrad Anker hired you to do it.
Yeah.
That seemed like more of something that you were really a project that you wanted to work on, and you needed to find funding for it. So then you pitched the sponsors to get funding for the project. So yeah. And this it sounds like you're writing grants for projects that you're interested in pursuing.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. I think so. And again, honestly, like I'm still figuring it out. I know some people are really good at it, or like once you already have the connection with just say the North Face, right? Then it's like, what do you want to, they're probably going to come at you and say, what do you want to do this year? Or what do you have in mind this year? Rather than me being like, hey, I'm this random dude. I want to make this film. Can you, chip in some money for it or chip in some gear or something like that. So
yeah.
Like with La Sportiva, Kevin in the Cave, that piece, we pitched it to them, but just as like a gear sponsorship. So we could get clothing and shoes and accessories for people that are helping or working on it. And that makes it a lot easier because then they're just like gears. I won't speak for every company, but less intense than money typically. So it's an easier trade to do.
Sure. Yeah. I wonder also if that kind of goes to the whole documentary aspect of being a filmmaker too, because it's not like you pay people to be in a documentary as opposed to if it is, commercial, like a TV commercial or some sort of scripted film or something like that, then the budget goes to, beyond it goes to the actors, as well. So, yeah, I don't know. Did you have a budget in there for it? Takes a lot of, first of all, I have to acknowledge that it takes a lot of time to edit.
So much time to edit. Oh my God. I think on Nutcracker I'm at I was tallying for a while, but it started to drive me insane. But I'm up in like the 30s to 40s on editing like chunks. Maybe it's not 6 hours, but at least 2 to 3 hour chunks. So
yeah. Well, and then that's a 34-minute film. So I mean, if you put that into perspective, it's like, 10 hours per every minute of film.
Oh my God. It makes me want to just I got a camp pad right there with a pillow. I'm like, that looks pretty good sometimes. Just sell everything, go walk around and grab that thing and disappear.
Yeah. Well, and then also the camera equipment itself is very expensive, and drones, the quality of lenses and things like that. I mean, all of that is very expensive. And, I feel like the industry is changing a lot right now too. So as I'm talking about, these things that you have to outlay, I'm thinking also about where these things are shot. And so you're probably also on some fixed lines, and gear is not cheap. Right? Like the ropes and harnesses and carabiners and locking carabiner, all that stuff. That's not cheap either. But how do you protect your gear? Like, I mean, this is a risk every time you go out and film on the side of, a mountain. You're at the whim of weather.
Yeah. It's hard. So like with Kevin in the Cave is actually it's a easy quote unquote because it's a cave and we only have one location and we can hang ourselves from. We had 3 different main points that we'd hang from, and like everything's pretty protected except for that cave. It's constantly eroding, so rocks will randomly fall, which is terrifying. And it's in the video. You can see rocks falling as he's climbing, and he's done that loop so many times. So to be honest, I'm just like crossing my fingers. I've got, my life savings on my lap, and I'm like, I hope this doesn't just fall or get hit by something. And then on the Nutcracker, it was way more difficult because there's lots of free hanging space time and you're spinning in circles. But then the added difficulty is there's an ice climb up above you. And that ice climb is like a 2-pitch, super huge chunk of ice. And there's pieces constantly falling or like water trickling and that sort of thing. So we actually have a photo of Austin Schmitz where he's taking photos, but he's under basically a waterfall. And he's totally soaking wet. And he has the camera like tucked under his arm. But there's only so much you can do. So we ended up losing one audio recorder, and then people won't be able to see video, but there's I bought these like nicer cinema lenses for this project specifically because I wanted to look really nice. Yeah. And that one ended up getting smashed on the rock because I would spin and it was behind my back. So I hit the housing of it and then bent the internal mechanism. And so I had to send that back into Canon to get fixed, and that was more expensive than some lenses just to get it fixed. So so it's tough. It's like, it feels like lose because it's like gear, it's like climbing gear, it's like film gear, it's like you're putting in the worst conditions, you're getting your ass kicked, and all this kind of stuff. But it's also like, I won't say every time, but almost every time I'm out shooting something like that, I'm like having the time of my life, and I'm like so happy and so psyched and like, oh, we're doing this thing that's like so weird and abstract and strange and challenging, but hopefully we're like doing it well, and it's super fun too for everybody.
Sure. And media has really played a part in partnering with these athletes because, these are things that normally, or in the past, I mean, this is a real convergence in history, I think, right now, because people were climbing these things and maybe at best they would get some still photos, and now it's like we're getting close-ups, we're seeing, the placements, the footholds, the falling, the dripping ice, the piece of the ice fall that breaks off, in real time. And it's a real point in history. And this is part of the reason why I think that the industry is changing. So how do you feel about that? Were you always a climber?
No, I've been climbing probably 4 or 5 years, and like a friend recommended that I got into it, and I obviously wanted to do video and photo stuff, and so it's kind of like a natural progression. And like honestly, the first time I went climbing, I hated it. I wasn't super into it outside, and then I went to the gym a few times. I hated that, and then
Nice.
it was funny. I went ice climbing with a friend of a friend who I didn't even know. He's like, you should go with this guy, you'll get along. And I had a fucking blast. Like ice climbing for me was like what clicked. And I was like frozen and cold and like everything kind of sucked, but I was like so happy. So ice climbing is like kind of what got me really motivated to shoot more climbing type sports. But I digress. Like we were just looking at the old ice climbing book from like the early 90s, late 80s last night, my girlfriend and I, and we were like, man, they could only get one photo with a film camera, and it's like, I'm like looking, I'm like, oh man, my photos are so much better. Wow, gee whiz. But all they could really do is like, stay below, and like they probably had one lens on there, they didn't have like all the ranges. So they'd just be like clip, and they'd be psyched. They're like, we got a photo of it. And now we can like, I can carry 5 lenses with me because a lot of them are smaller. I can bring 3 or 4 different cameras. I can bring a drone. We can like spray these things down like crazy. And so I think from my perspective of being like a shooter, editor, film person, it's like it's really fun and exciting to be able to get all these details and like build up these emotions while people are climbing. But I do agree that there could be the downside that you might be losing some of the imagination and aesthetic that goes into these climbs, because I see these old photos and I'm like, oh, I gotta go there and check that out. Like, what's that over there? Because you can't see everything. Whereas if I watched a video, I might be more like, oh, that's like, I got it. I know what's going on. So
Yeah, yeah. Did you watch The Alpinist by chance?
I did. It's amazing.
So what you're saying now kind of makes me think of how Marc Andre went off and summited uh in Canada and didn't tell Sender that he was going to break off and go and do that. And his response was something like, well, then I wouldn't have been alone,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah,
And so, yeah, so that I remember the first time I ever saw a documentary on, besides like, historical ones, right? But like a real time, documentary on some big wall. And my first thought was, well, good Lord. I mean, you've got like these camera guys that are right there, hanging off of fixed lines. And so then I had to come to the conclusion that it's style, really, that is, the difference between getting this guy up there with all this camera gear, documenting it, hanging on fixed lines or whatever, and anchored in, and then they have to be in the right place too. Because I mean, some of these, like the Nutcracker, how high is it's like
yeah, there's no ground. I mean,
you have to be in the right place at the right time.
yeah, on the first pitch, if you fall, it's like 1,000-foot drop to the main trail. So
Yeah, it's scary. Does that ever cross your mind that you're gonna document some horrific tragedy like?
oh yeah, no, that was horrible. We were planning to film the solo since the get go with Matt, because we had filmed Come and Get It, and that went super smooth. So we're all like psyched and happy and like, oh, it went great. Let's do another one. But the nice thing about Come and Get It is like you can see the ground below. Like if he falls, you're like, he's gonna be really messed up or potentially killed. But like at least we know where he goes. On the Nutcracker, it's like it's a shelf, and then it's another shelf, and then some more smaller shelves, and then a bunch of trees, and then it's like it's called Land of the Lost, like literally called Land of the Lost. So while you're filming, you're like looking down on him climbing, and if he pops, it's like you have no idea where he's gonna go. And that like once that clicked in my head, it was haunting, and like we all started having nightmares of Matt falling, and then I actually grew like an eye cyst because I was so stressed out about it, and I'd wake up at night and like do one of those like those because he had like popped off and fallen, and so after much deliberation and discussion, we actually decided to not film his solo. One for crew's mental health, two for well more I should say one because it's like such a personal experience, like Andre was talking about, that it's like if this is something he wants to do, we should give him the grace to go out and have that experience on his own, and we don't need to be meddling and interfering. We can document the process and like how it all came to be, but for the actual experience, since the experience is supposed to be his, we should just like step away and let it go. So it was a tough time and conversation, honestly, because we had all worked so hard. Matt went up there like 30 or 40 days practicing. I went up like, I think we counted 10 to 12 days filming, getting ready for the thing. So But in the end, like looking back now, hindsight, I think we all feel like we made the right decision to like step back, let Matt do his thing. We still got the film. We're all still very happy with it. But it's just in the moment, it's always hard to know, like, am I being weak? Am I being scared? Like, should I just like man up and go for it? So it's all those kind of weird questions that come to mind.
Yeah, those are hard decisions to make.
Yeah.
Sure. And on the Nutcracker, you had gotten a Native American
Yeah.
songwriter
Michael Spears.
for a minute. That's fantastic. What's his name?
Michael Spears.
That was beautiful. I mean, it's heart-wrenching to listen to. It's so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, Michael's amazing. He's done a lot of like Hollywood films over the years, even since he was a kid. He's like a professional actor. But then his other passion is he has the Bear Canyon Singers Group, which is like a traditional drumming circle and singing with his friends. And so Conrad knew him well from Bozeman Ice Fest. And then the conversation between a couple people was like, hey, we should have this open with a Native American tribute for the lands. And then we reached out to Michael and he was all in. So I don't know for sure what the words are to the song yet, but I do know that he had a family member pass in that same time. And so I'm kind of curious if it's not a song about that family member passing, but then he maybe shaped it to the film because he said he watched the film 3 or 4 times and wrote the song for the film. But on his first take, he actually cried and like he was so emotive. So I was trying to, I still haven't like broken through on what he's actually saying yet, but I'm piecing together kind of his story of what's happening in his life, seeing the film, and then everything else that's happening in the world, kind of coming into that one song. So I agree. I was like, we had heard it. Yeah, we didn't hear it until he sang it live the first time. There was no recording, so
it is seriously like a wolf or a moose mourning deep in the woods or something like that is the feeling that I get from it. Do you know what language it is?
I don't honestly.
Does he ice climb? What was he doing at the Bozeman Ice Festival?
It's just I won't say just, but JoJo, who runs Ice Fest, wanted to do a Native Lands tribute, and they've opened Ice Fest. I don't know how many years in a row, but a lot of years in a row with Michael and the Bear Canyon Singers.
Oh, fantastic!
So, yeah, and I know I have I have the language in an email, but there's 4 or 5 different tribes to that area, and so I don't want to say the wrong one, to be honest with you.
Okay, no, I was just curious if you knew. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I remember looking at the poster for Kevin in the Cave, and it was like Shoshone, Babbitt, and then Cherokee, I think, was in there, and then there were 2 other ones that I was less familiar with. But but up in Alaska, there's the same I guess sort of like foreign language issue where, I feel like I'm, trying to go through some of these Yupik terms. And just because I want to know how to say like I think I can say like hello and thank you in 11 different languages,
Wow, that's impressive.
That's super impressive.
Well, that's where it ends. That's where it ends, though. But there's a lot of like these little apostrophe marks in Yupik, and so I don't know how that accents the letters because I've never known anybody really that was willing to sit down and talk to or wasn't just anglicized, So yeah, so that's something that's on my bucket list, I guess, a little bit to learn more. Also,
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's interesting how language can be so political. I had opened a cultural center in Illinois at one point, and I had somebody who I grew up at this going to this bookstore my whole life. I grew up and I, as an adult, I was in there, and now I, was running this cultural center. And we had a bunch of different languages and schools that were happening out of it. And I was purchasing a book at the bookstore, and I was, I'm always happy to go in there. Bookstores are just, family-owned bookstores are just like so great,
Agreed. They're so warm and cute and welcoming.
And so then this lady gives me my book back. She rings it up, pushes it towards me, and says, "I just want you to know we speak English in this country."
Ooh.
Yeah, I was like,
Ooh.
holy smokes, did this just happen?
Where was this at?
That I grew up in, I couldn't believe it.
Wow. What town or state was that?
This was in Naperville, Illinois.
Naperville, Illinois.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah, and it's so tricky
It's
too,
surprising.
because you want to be very respectful, and like I'm a white male and I'm trying to understand my place in this whole thing, and be very respectful and cautious and still keep making things. And
Yeah.
so like even that Michael, with this situation, that Michael was willing to do it, because it is a couple white males making a movie about it. I thought that was pretty cool of him. But yeah, it's tricky. It's a really tricky time.
Yeah, it's so I think that this, we're crossing a lot of boundaries that were invisible barriers historically right now in a lot of different ways. I mean, in the sense like we spoke about earlier, just being able to document some of the work that these climbers are doing.
Yeah.
Bringing that, I think that also we're the more that we can encourage people to get outside, it goes hand in hand with making the documentaries, because you're bringing something that normally was like this hidden thing to the public viewers that might not have had either awareness of it or been able to go out and do it.
I totally agree. Yeah, and I hope through that as well, we kind of like touch on the climate change issue, and we're like more conscious of it, even though it's like, yeah, it's through proxy, I guess is the right way to say it. What made it click for me was I have an uncle in the Midwest who is not into climbing, who's not into going outside. He's wonderful. He's super kind dude. But he watched one of my climbing films, and he's like, "Nathan does really good. Thanks for doing it so I don't have to." And that's kind of clicked for me, that a lot of people are happy to sit and enjoy it, but they don't actually want to go do it. And if they're not getting that message brought to them wherever they live in the world, they're not going to like get that little spark to be like, "Oh, this is like, these other things are happening. We need to be aware of our impact and what we're doing." And otherwise it's really easy just to kind of get in this little day-to-day life. Yeah, which I'm definitely guilty of too, living in Bozeman. Like, we're in a bubble, one of the biggest bubbles ever. So
Well, at least in Bozeman, you guys have a lot of people that are outdoorsy people. It's not like a ticky-tacky suburb with your ticky-tacky neighborhood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very true. It's very true.
So
I just like that phrase, ticky-tacky, for the record. Ticky-tacky. We can write a song about that, like ticky-tacky neighborhood.
I can see
there
it.
is. Isn't it from like Weeds or something? Yeah.
Forgive my singing, but
I remember sitting on top of I was on a roof of a hotel in like Orlando or something back in the day, and we were watching the sunrise, and all of a sudden it seemed like all at the same time. And the houses look like in Florida. They're all like pastel colors, and they're all like, they look all the same, and they're all different pastel colors. And I swear to God, at like whatever time it was, all of the garage doors went up, all the cars backed out.
all in unison?
It was so bizarre. It seemed like it. Yeah.
That's too much. I mean, maybe that's where we're going.
Yeah, it was like the 50s or something,
Yeah. Maybe that is our future. Maybe that's like a great lifestyle for humanity, but man, I don't want to do that.
It seems very inorganic.
It does, yeah. Unless we're like this giant collective thing, like trying to get cell phones in our brains so we can all communicate all at the same time. Like, I mean, maybe that's great. Maybe that's our future, but I still get way more joy like being in these hostile outdoor nature environments than I do on my cell phone on Instagram for the day. So
So what does the future hold for you and your company, you think? You're turning in the direction of eco or outdoor adventure. So where do you think this is going to take you? What are some of these projects that you've got lined up?
yeah, so we're actually gonna do another one with Matt this next week. We're starting it. It's a 7-pitch dry tooling route, which is gonna be awesome. No soloing, no drama. It's just like a really beautiful film. Is the goal for that one. The other one I'm really excited about that I've been working on for almost 2 years now is one on Pat Kallus. He's a 83-year-old ice climber, and yeah, he was the first to ever ice climb in Highlight, the local climbing area here. And he's amazing. I mean, he's still leading really hard ice climbs at 83 and teaching physics at the university and running the Ridge Run, which is like a 20-mile mountain run. You know, like I think I think speaking on like not losing sight of like humanity, he's kind of like this voice of like respecting our elders and learning from people previous, not just TikTok stars, and how we can learn and grow and be more like them in our future as well. Something like that. That's not quite right, but
I want to interview him. Like, what's
You
your
should-
secret, dude?
yeah, I know. See, that's part of what the film is about. It's like what keeps him going, and he's not like he's interesting. He's not like a military hard ass driven dude. He's not like, I'm gonna send the nar, look the fuck out, I'm going for it, get out my way. You know, there's none of that. He just has this pure expression of joy when he's rock climbing or ice climbing or running. You can just see his eyes like light up, and he gets so much joy out of it. And my favorite line so far is he just said like, I just need to keep going. I just need to keep exploring, and I just need to keep trying new things. And it's just like a genuine passion that I really want everybody else in the world to see, because I think that's so important to like keep moving and keep active and not just get stuck on our computers. Even though I'm making movies that people look at on computers, I acknowledge that, but you know, it's still a really positive message, hopefully.
No, right. Yeah. It's like, when they broke what was it, the 4-minute mile, and then people were aware of the breaking of the record. Then in that year, there were like 12 other people that broke the 4-minute mile.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And have you heard of blue zones?
Blue zone. I haven't heard of blue zones. No.
So blue zones are these places around the planet where people tend to live, and not just live, exist, but like thrive into their 80s, 90s, and 100s.
Oh,
Yeah, I knew. Okay, I'm looking. That's on my.
And purpose, having a sense of purpose is one of the main things. And they're totally unrelated places. I mean, one place could be like in the Middle East or the Mediterranean, the other place is in like Okinawa, Japan, and so there's not like they're talking to each other. Hey, yeah, so a sense of purpose, right? I mean, it's like this is right. These people went out and documented this stuff and data gathered, and having a sense of purpose, kind of like what you were saying. This gentleman was talking about was he just has to get up and go out, go explore. Like, he has to keep going, so that's his purpose.
It's amazing, right? And like, hopefully in one of the next interviews we get to the core of that. Like, where does that come from? Is that just something that you or I or whoever was born with, or is this something specific to Pat in the way he was raised, or like
Drive. Yeah.
what got into him to make him be a physicist, and not only that, like an adventure climber he's at 50. This is the 50th year that he climbed ice this year, and he's climbed every year for 50 years.
That's fantastic.
Oh.
There's a lot of, I talked to Dan Kopke last week, And he happens to be a physics major too. I think he's in like a master's or PhD program in physics. There's like is there like some connection between like physics and ice climbers or something?
I mean, I don't think you're wrong. There's a lot of people at the university that teach or study that are also big time adventure people, and that's another question for Pat is I'm trying to like, how are these two paralleling each other and then meeting? Like, is something about learning about the world, also learning about yourself, like at the core of what keeps you going? Is that a big motivation for you? Thanks for helping me make my film, by the way. This is great. I'm like brainstorming as we're going here. I didn't have this all written out, but I'm going to save this recording too and like just pull from
Well, it's going to be posted next Tuesday.
Okay, well, perfect. I'll just re-listen to it then. I'll be like, all right, that's my movie.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, maybe Bozeman is going to be like the next Blue Zone. You never know.
It very well could be. There's lots of, I won't say old people, but like people in their 60s and 70s, still running and skiing and biking and climbing. And there's I don't know if you've heard of the, what do they call it? The Silver Fox Club of Bozeman.
No kidding.
Yeah, there's like 5 or 6 like very handsome Silver Fox climbers, that are still out doing stuff. So
that's hilarious. They all need like matching t-shirts or jackets or something.
I'm thinking silver onesies, 80s, little throwback action.
Nice. We're sitting around the campfire. Well, I wonder if Matt is going to be one of those people too, because I couldn't believe that he was riding his bike from like, how many miles is that even? Like, I just couldn't believe that he was out there doing that and through the mountains. And then I thought it was great too that he hitchhiked at some part of that. When I was in Hawaii, it was like you could just hitchhike everywhere, and like, living in like a sort of city, people just you don't see that, but like hitchhiking into Highlight, which is beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing place.
Yeah. And then him just riding his bicycle. Did he say into California?
Yeah, it's really far. I mean, I drove there once from Bozeman, like a total asshole, right? But I think it was like 1,500 miles. That might be way too much. Maybe that was round trip. But it took me a day and a half one way driving, going at a normal speed. So it's a long ways. And like, he's kind of like, I agree. He could be one of the Blue Zone people because he can just keep going and doing stuff. It doesn't always have to be climbing. It can be biking or whatever. And he can just keep going. Like that guy, when we were shooting the Nutcracker, he would take a rest day like every 12 days or something like that. Like 8 or 12 days. I'm like, yeah, I think it's time for a rest day. I'm like, fuck you, man. I need a rest day tomorrow. Like, it's so frustrating sometimes. He can kind of just keep on going. So
yeah, I heard somebody say that having, getting up and going to do that, and also just like there is a sense of purpose in like, so if like you get up, I mean, so like Matt lives in a hammock or whatever in the summertime, right? And then under the stairs in the wintertime, like Harry Potter.
Yeah. Glasses.
So that maybe is some motivating factor to get up and to get going. But then, it keeps your mind from wandering. You have a very like distinct thing that you're going out to do, and then when you're on the wall, your placements they have to be very specific.
Yeah.
And, just to keep yourself safe. So, the level of focus, I think, so, I mean, yes, it's a lot of physical exertion, but I wonder, if like having these rest days every 12 days instead of every other day or, 3 times a week, it's probably because, where does your mind go if you're on a rest day?
Yeah. No, I agree. He is definitely one of the most dedicated and driven people to a sport or activity or goal that I know. Like it's pretty amazing that his whole life revolves around climbing and adventuring and that sort of thing, and he'll do whatever he can to do it. And there's been a couple of discussions too, like what you're saying, like on a rest day, he's like starts like question his motives and like what am I actually doing with my time? Is this really worth it? That sort of thing. So I think you're right.
Do you mind my asking what film school did you go to? Did you grow up in Bozeman?
Oh no, I don't mind. I'm originally from eastern South Dakota. It's like a tiny little town of 10,000 people. Rode my bike to the grocery store every day to buy like pop guns and that sort of thing, potato guns. Then I moved out here about 10-ish years ago, and then went to film school. It's MSU Bozeman, the undergrad program. So, yep, they have a master's in documentary, which probably would have been more fitting for me, but I didn't have my undergrad yet. So I just did like the creative fiction writing type undergrad.
Did you always know that filmography was something that you were going to want to do?
I didn't. I was always, it's podcast, but I have this painting behind me. I actually started out as a painter.
Is that yours?
Yeah, it's huge.
Beautiful.
I don't know if you can see it, but I was really interested in like experimental, abstract, weird painting ever since I was pretty little, like 10-ish. I remember going to an art gallery once. And so I actually went to school for the first year for painting. And then I was like, how am I going to make a life out of this, And but then I was also really interested in writing and documentary and that kind of stuff. So I tried to be a writer next. That didn't work. And then I got a camera. Then I tried to do this travel trip by motorcycle to make a documentary about it. That failed horribly. I sucked. Yeah, it was bad. I came home with like. Well, I didn't know what I was doing, so I didn't save the footage right. And so I lost like 80% of the footage. And it was, I mean, like in a perfect world, in the next 10 years, I'd go back and like make a proper movie about it or something, because it's kind of a fun story. Like 20-year-old kid hops on a cheap motorcycle and drives up to Alaska. It's like kind of classic American story. I just didn't have the knowledge to do it right, at the time. So
now you do, but would you want to take a cheap motorcycle up to Alaska?
Yeah, I don't know. It'd have to be like a fictional movie or something like that, where I shoot and edit it. I'm not actually in it.
Have you ever read Motorcycle Diaries? The Che Guevara book?
Yep.
That's fantastic. What a fantastic story that is.
Huge motivation for it. And the movie is beautiful too. I really like the movie that's on it.
Yeah, the one with Gabriel, that guy?
Yes. I wish I could say his name correctly. I know who you're talking about. He's one of my favorite actors.
Yeah, he's great for sure. No, it was well done. I thought it was well done. I think the book it's probably like half of the book. Like I remember reading Seabiscuit, and the movie was like 1/4 of the book.
Feel so cheated, right?
For sure. There's so much more good stuff, but there's this guy up in Alaska too. If you ever get a chance, his website is his name is Luke Mehl, LucMehl. And his website is things to look at, but instead of look, LOOK, it's LUC. So it's like a play on his name. And what an interesting fellow he is. He has traveled 10,000 or more than 10,000 miles around Alaska by, get this, ice skating, skiing, biking, and not fat biking either, like mountain tire bikes, like just like tiny 2-inch, 3-inch
mini tires.
Yes. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? There's like some iPhone footage of like them pushing these bikes through this snow that's, a foot deep or whatever. I was like, man, if you have fat tire bikes, you might be able to get some float, over that. But
that sounds amazing. Like that speaks to how adventure can be, like climbing to like riding a bike in the snow to ice skating in the snow. It doesn't have to be like these super marketable hot topics right now. I'd be more interested in watching a video on him ice skating across Alaska than I would a lot of climbing movies. Because we've done so many of them. So
It's absolutely gorgeous. And, I'll send you a link also, but he's got this, like, I guess once a year he has like an iHeart Alaska video that is like a compilation of all of the photos and stuff like that. So you can see some of the ice skating that they do, because I mean, think about how many frozen bodies of water there are too. So you're hiking along and it's just like, oh geez, well now we have to cross this giant,
just chucking my ice skates real quick. Yeah. Oh man, my ice skates are a little dull. I got to sharpen them up with my ice axe.
Right. And that is a lot of gear to bring along with you too, for sure. But yeah,
I grew up
and all that. Yeah.
I grew up playing hockey. That was like the only thing you could really do in the winter in South Dakota. There's no skiing or anything. So, but I always had the dream of, I guess in Norway, there's all the little, correct me if I'm wrong, are they fjords? Like little channels that connect the towns? And I was flipping through a book because I'm Norwegian, and I was like, oh, Mom, we got to go to Norway so I can skate in between the towns. Like, how fun would that be? And the reality kind of strikes, though, like in an ice rink, you're like here to there chasing a puck. But when you're like, if you ever go out on a lake and you want to skate to the other side of the lake, a quarter of the way to the lake, you're like, this was a terrible idea. Like, look how far that is. Like, the joy kind of goes. It's not like a road bike adventure. It's like a sprint, so.
I would be way more afraid of falling into a hole or something.
Yeah.
You see like also these snowmobilers, the snow machiners, and all of a sudden they're falling into like some, they lost their machine in a crevasse somewhere, like just because I mean, how fast you're going and ice skating too, you can get some speed.
Yeah.
For sure. And then fall into the.
No, I agree that there's isn't it in Frozen when they're under the ice and
Frozen, the Disney movie?
Yeah, and they're trying to get
I'm allergic to Disney.
Oh. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's oh wait, no, cliffhanger. Cliffhanger is probably more appropriate for this conversation. Isn't the man, he's under ice and he has the the bolt gun and he shoots it through the ice. So Stallone is like shooting through the ice. Like we just watched that a couple weeks ago. So awesome.
I had to watch that after I realized that one of the guys from Camp 4 actually sold that story. Like it was a true story. Of like, yeah, an airplane had gone down in Yosemite. And so the campers were all like, let's go see what it is. And then it was like, they're like, it smells like weed. And it was a giant airplane that was full of weed.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. And somebody from Camp 4 pitched that?
Yep.
Oh my God.
That's where this cliffhanger came from.
I mean, I acknowledge that it's like one of the most cheesy movies of all time, but it's also so much fun to watch. It's like let that all aside and just like enjoy it and have fun watching a good old Stallone movie.
Yeah. No, it is. It's definitely, it should be on everyone's must-watch list for sure.
I totally agree.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with me today. I look forward to seeing some of your future documentaries coming out. And NathanNorby.com, is that right?
Yeah, that'll work. That'll take you everything you ever need to know. It's all there.
I love it. Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed watching Kevin in the Cave and the Nutcracker. And I look forward to presenting some of your work at the Valdez Ice Climbing Festival in February. Yeah. So, really excited. And Kevin coming out to be an instructor as well as Kate McKinstry.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. That's so awesome. A couple locals getting up there.
That's right. That's right.
So exciting. No, thank you for taking the time to talk about this stuff. And it's always fun to talk about film and life and what's happening in the world. So very grateful that you took the time as well. So thank you. And thanks for showing the films or one of them or whatever happens. It's still cool. So
absolutely. All right, Nathan. Well, you have a great rest of your day, okay?
You too. Take care. Thanks again.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening to LoTech Tuesdays by LoTech and Wild. This podcast supports Valdez Adventure Alliance up in Valdez, Alaska, where they strongly believe in nature therapy. Their goal is to bring this to those who will appreciate it, one might say those who need it. Their focus is teaching through play. They are strong encouragers. The events and resources that they provide will help people find the satisfaction of self-accomplishment through effort, of climbing, of riding bikes, of hiking, of trail building, of immersing in nature. They encourage people to allow themselves to surrender to the flow of the vast beauty of those mountains and the Prince William Sound. Their objective is to be a resource for people to find deep happiness and healthy outlets for themselves in these ever-trying times. We would like to shout out to some of the Valdez Adventure sponsors, including IMBA, International Mountain Biking Association, Access Fund, Protecting America's Climbing, and the American Alpine Club. Some local sponsors include the City of Valdez, the CVEA Community Foundation, Alyeska Pipeline, the Fat Mermaid, the Prospector, Valdez Avalanche Center, Raven, Alaska. We'd also like to give a big shout out to Loa Boots, Tiger Tail, Hyperlight, the National Scenic Byway Foundation, Mountain Equipment, RAB, and Nick Wax. Thanks again for listening and enjoy your day.